Anyways, in 1932, German Nazism and German capitalism reach an accommodation. Hitler becomes the Führer, and they purge the anti-capitalist elements of the party, Gregor and Otto Strasser, as well as they round up, like I said, all of the socialist elements within society. We're talking thousands of people, by the way. The Browncoats arrested communists. They arrested socialists. They despised them. There was an anti-Marxian sentiment that was deeply pervasive within Nazi society. Anyone telling you different is ignoring a huge part of history. That was key. This is one of the reasons why Nazism is associated directly with far-right ideology, because the hard center set of nationalism had to be combined with a hatred of liberalism, yes, as well as socialism and communism, all right? Hi, everyone. There's going to be a little bit of history in this segment, but interesting history. The one part of history that everyone likes to talk about, the Nazis. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Because when I say that, I can't monetize this video anymore. I don't want to say the N words though, because then people will think I'm talking about something else. So people ask why don't I script these, or if I do script these. The answer is I don't, and I should to both. Anyways, let's talk about this a little bit and talk about some history. I'm sure everyone has been seeing that Destiny's friend, the omni-liberal, has been making some spicy takes, some real spicy takes lately about socialists. Socialists and Nazis should be treated the same on the internet. If you see me going too softly on a Nazi, feel free to point it out. Jokes, edgy boy jokes, right? Edgy memes. Going from socialist suck to I love Jordan Peterson is like stepping in shit and then deciding to run into traffic. Imagine spending my entire fucking life arguing with my parents that socialism isn't just the government doing stuff, just for socialists to come online and proudly proclaim socialism is just when the government does stuff. The only path forward for socialism is neuroscience. Socialists need to focus less on the redistribution of wealth and more on the redistribution of IQ. Just kidding, everyone knows that the intelligentsia are the first on the wall in the socialist regimes, just like police academies. Socialists prefer their fodder to be less than 95 IQ individuals. Noticed a lot of tread lickers in my mentions today, etc., etc. I'm sure all of you have been seeing it and seen the posts and all the spicy takes. And I know a lot of people have rushed to Destiny's defense and saying that this is a matter of semantics. Destiny has confused what the internet calls tankies with socialists. Because socialists, of course, by definition, are workers owning the means of production as well as the means of distributing what that production produces. And then tankies on the internet, of course, refer to people who engage in apologia for Stalin or Mao's regimes. And it's odd because that word has meant many different things throughout history. But now online, distinctly, that's usually what it means. It usually means people who are often white, who are very, very online, and will engage in the Twitter debatosphere. Many of them have recently taken to saying that the accusations of either a traditional genocide or a cultural genocide on the behalf of the Chinese government towards the Uyghur Muslim minorities in Xinjiang is made up, or is part of a CIA op, or is part of war drumming, or any one of those things. So that's when people get decidedly mad at tankies on the internet. And in this case, Destiny happens to be confusing or conflating the two, or he's speaking about all lefties as he often does in a generality, and just saying that all of them, I hate them all, this is the problem, and what's going on here. I also noticed not too long ago, there was a discussion not only by him, but several other people online related to World War II, which I thought would be an awesome time to explore a little bit of history and go and see whether or not the statement was Hitler and is fascism capitalist. Is it truly capitalist? Because there are some who say it is not. There are many who say that, of course, well, I mean, if you take right-wingers like Steven Crowder, they'll tell you that it's got socialism in the name, you know, the Nazi Party, National Socialist Party. So right there, it's in the name. So they were socialists. And then other people will tell you that fascism and the economics of the German war machine still allowed for both capitalist institutions as well as the large accruement of wealth. In fact, under Hitler's Germany, private capital actually increased dramatically, as did industry. So where does the truth lie? Truly, it must be somewhere in the middle there. There must be something. I did want to quickly give everyone some fun definitions. This is a book by, I'm sure some of you know, Professor Richard Wolff, who writes in depth about the history of socialism, both for the USSR, as well as other numerous countries in South and Central America and Asia, and gives a very concise concise definition in his opinion on what he thinks is 21st century socialism, if you will. The key difference between the emerging socialism of the 21st century and the previous socialist tradition is the former's advocacy of the microeconomic transformation of the internal structure and organization of the workplaces. So in essence, what he is really advocating for is us to transform society at a microeconomic level, by which his proposal and prescription is worker cooperatives, in which all the workers control the means of their own production, own the means of their production, and also have a democratic voice to vote what to do with said means once they're created. His more broader definition of socialism, and this one is really quite broad. Some of you will think this is lovely and illuminating, and I'm sure some of you will think that this is way too vague. The definition of modern socialism. Socialism is a yearning by people living in a capitalist economy, whether private or state capitalist, to do better than what capitalism permits and enables. That on its surface, it sounds very broad. It sounds lovely, obviously. By doing better, socialists mean many things. One is having work that is more socially meaningful, less physically, environmentally destructive, and more secure in delivering an adequate income for yourself and your family than what is generally available in capitalist societies. Another is having a lifelong education, leisure, and civil freedoms to pursue real participation in politics, intimate and friendship relationships, and cultural activities of your choice. Socialists want to be able to explore and develop the full potential as individuals and members of society while contributing to its welfare and growth. So it eased a little bit into SOCDEM territory there as well, but quite a lovely definition, certainly. A little broad, a little vague. The book then, of course, goes into detail into various other parts in history. Like I said, it'll talk about Germany. It talks about the USSR. The reason it brings up Germany in detail is to talk about efforts to destroy socialism, which is why when people on the internet compare socialists to Nazis, or even sometimes when people compare those who were in USSR, communists to Nazis and vice versa, why these comparisons I do not think are fair. And also, it would be a fun moment to go a little bit into the history books, but revised history, of course. I'm going to rewrite history. It's going to be pseudo-historical. I am a pseudo-historian, after all, an armchair pseudo-historian, and this is going to be armchair pseudo-history. Learning is fun. I made some charts. I made charts. I did this. I made this. I did want to quickly talk about the economic conditions in Germany that led to the Nazis. Because when you talk about things like dialectical materialism, basically looking at history through a lens, and that lens is based on the things that we got, based on our possessions. Not just looking at it, say, like, well, the Crusades were clearly partially, if not a lot, about religion, right? It was a religious and a holy war. But other events in human history, you can kind of look at resources, at kingdoms, at growth, at property, stuff of this nature, and use it to try and do an analysis of history and why things developed and how to prevent them and or try and hold them off, such as, you know, the thing most people probably don't want, which is more fascism. I think we'd like to all have less fascism. So there were some major events in Germany between 1914 and 1929 that led to the rise of the Nazis. The biggest and most obvious one, of course, is they lost World War I. Adolf Hitler was in there, and post-World War I, of course, there was a huge crunch on the German economy. Lots of reparations and other things were being charged upon them. In 1921, there was inflation. And I just wanted to give an idea of what the inflation was like. In 1919, $1 would get you 48 Deutschmarks. So that would be the transfer here. Sorry, the exchange. In 1922, $1 would get you 7,400 Deutschmarks, which is ridiculous. But by 1923, $1 would get you 4 trillion Deutschmarks. The rate at which inflation was occurring at this time, which was the greatest that had ever happened in human history, was so that if you bought something, or you got paid, you would then have to run, literally, to the store to be able to exchange it for as much stuff as possible. For if you were not fast enough, it would not be worth enough to be able to purchase groceries by the time you wanted to get home. That was an actual thing that was happening. So, huge financial crush, huge devastation in the war, massive inflation. And then, through all of this, the Great Depression hits, and the German working class is obliterated. So it's in these conditions that a younger Adolf Hitler Does the beer hall push? Now, I know that when the Capital 6 insurrection occurred, a lot of people were comparing it to the Night of the Long Knives, which I think is completely wrong. I'm not sure why. I saw the passion in Schwarzenegger's eyes. I felt the passion. But really, this was what I would compare it closer to. And this is what, I'm sorry, I'm going to Wikipedia Andy a little bit out here, but I just want to give quick summarizations for everybody. The Beer Hall Push, also known as the Munich Push, was a failed coup d'etat by the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler, Erich Ludendorff, the Kampflun members in Munich, Bavaria. During the Weimar Republic, approximately 2,000 Nazis marched on the Ferdenhal in the city center, but were confronted by a police cordon, and it resulted in the deaths of 16 Nazi Party members and 4 police officers. Hitler, who had been wounded during the clash, escaped immediate arrest and was spirited off to safety in the countryside. 2 days later, he was arrested and charged with treason. It was in jail that Hitler wrote Mein Kampf. What else was weird is they released him very quickly. Back then, they didn't jail people for quite as long. His arrest was followed by a 24-day trial, which was widely publicized, and gave him a platform to express his nationalist sentiments to the nation, so it made him into a celebrity. Hitler was found guilty of treason, and he was sentenced to 5 years, where he dedicated Mein Kampf to fellow prisoners Emil Maurice and Rudolf Hess. And then on December 20th, 1924, having served only 9 months, Hitler was released. Sorry, it wasn't even a year. I was wrong. It wasn't even in a year. And then he was released. So all this happens, Great Depression, the German working class is fractured, everyone is poor, everyone cannot afford to buy food, stuff of that nature. It's in these conditions that the Germans are split into 3 parties, really, 3 main parties. And I'm going to show you a bunch of different elections that occur. They break into the Social Democratic Party, and because at this time capitalism is woefully unpopular with Germans, because the mentions, all the things I'm listing right here, there was not going to be such a thing as a right-wing capitalist party on the surface. So Hitler, doing what was smart at the time, calls himself the National Socialist Party. However, their politics were decidedly to the right of the other 2 parties, and then there was the Communist Party of Germany. There's a lot of other parties, of course. I know people in the chat right now are going to list, let's forget about this. I'm going to show you them, okay? We're going to put them on screen. But I'm saying these are the main 3 that a lot of the German working class is splintered into and goes into the following elections with. So let's look at the elections themselves. Mainly 1928, the 1928 German federal election. I like things with visuals and images, but you can really see the sock dems, the little cute socks. They got a lot of sway. They're quite a large voting party, but this is still a parliamentary system, and there's still multiple parties. But still, at this time, it does not look like the Nazi Party is any kind of a threat. Nazi Party's all the way down here, only making up 1 line. In fact, the Nazi Party only gets 2.6% of the vote. Did not do good. Did not do good. The Nazis, they're popular, but they're still considered kind of extremists, all right? They're only getting 810,000 votes, but the Social Democratic Party, overwhelming, 9 million votes. Next is the German National People's Party, then the Center Party, the Communist Party of Germany. So, multiple parties getting things. Nazis, not that popular. Then we skip ahead to the 1932 German federal election. Yikes. Yikes. A lot changed. It's a whole lot of Nazi dots. It's a lot of Nazi dots on the screen. Yeah. Not good. Not good. It's quite a difference. Quite a difference. Now, there was a whole bunch of events that happened, of course, and one of the biggest ones being the Reichstag fire, which is something that frightens people deeply. It turns out that it was actually caused by the Nazis themselves. But it's no question by this point the Nazis do have a decided lead and are one of the they are the largest party in Germany. 13 million votes, 37% of the electorate. Then the Soc Dems in second place, still trying to hold off the Nazis with 21.58%. But it's Nazi good. It's Nazi good. All right. This is very, very shitty. Now, it would be a lie to tell you that the Nazis were voted into power. They were not. Hitler did not become Der Führer by the Nazi Party. No. That is a lie. Originally, there was what we could call a communist fraction of the Nazi Party. There were certainly some, they weren't communists themselves. They did not go by communist names. I will say they were anti-capitalist. There was anti-capitalists amongst the Nazis. They were not the dominating force, however, but they were eliminated. Bismarck and von Hindenburg were the capitalist feudal alliance blamed for World War I's loss. At the time, Germany, yes, was a hybrid of capitalism and feudalism. Oh, that's a weird footnote to tell everybody, and this is one of the most fascinating ones, but there's not a linear timeline for the advancements of capitalism. If we want to take a quick step back and talk about Marx and what exactly Marx discovered and why people to this day still study Marx and still talk about his works, he was able to identify something, and that was the class conflict between different kinds. So we have three major paradigms that go on through history, all right? We've got the paradigm of the master and the slave, in which case the master owns the slave is property, and the master then takes all of the work and the labor from the slave and is still responsible for a few costs. It's by ratio of human cruelty to how much do you want to be able to pay and feed the slave. Sorry, not pay, no pay, there's zero pay, but sorry, clothe and feed the slave, and what conditions you want the slaves to have. That was basically the big things that you had to think about versus how much labor value they were going to pull back to you. And since you didn't consider them humans, they were subhuman, they were animals to you, then you were trying to extract as much as you could possibly from them. There was other systems, of course. There's feudal systems, lords and serfs, and that was better. That was better than slavery. It was a decided advantage to be a serf over being a slave, definitely. However, slavery and feudalism existed at the same time. The same thing can be true about capitalism. Now, capitalism, as Marx identified, was a conflict between the employer and employee. That was the conflict that was going to be created. And in order to extract surplus value, they would have to then pay the employee less than what they were being generating in products. That's basically the summation of Marxian analysis of both economists and the paradigm between classes. Marx identified that if there was going to be an employer-employee, then that conflict was constantly going to create class friction and class stratification. And that even though he had lived through things like the French Revolution, which included liberté, égalité, fraternité, all things that sound unbelievable, you're like, holy fuck, I want that. Yes, amazing. Yes, equality, liberty, fraternity amongst all peoples. This is fantastic. He discovered that under capitalism, these kind of things weren't really being fairly distributed or weren't being achieved at all. So how do you end this kind of struggle between the different classes and the conflicts that are therein? However, under capitalism, slavery still existed. That's one of the reasons the North Atlantic slave trade was so very valuable to America. And that's one of the reasons that American white class was able to enrich themselves so much. So just because you have a new economic system like capitalism, and it wasn't capitalism the same way we have capitalism as today, there was multiple different versions of it that would spring up sometimes and then get crushed, sometimes by a feudal lord. Sometimes a feudal lord would destroy an uprising. Sometimes an uprising would kill a feudal lord. And then a new system of economic structure would arise. But this would pop in and pop out. It wasn't like a linear thing. Like all of a sudden we had slavery and slavery ended, and then we have feudalism and feudalism ended, and then when feudalism's over, then it switches over to this new economic system, and this is the new one that we're going to follow. That's not it. These things are popping up and dropping all over the place. Even to this day, by the way, there's still multiple different kinds of economic systems that go on around the world, hybrid models, versions of one, versions of the other. Sometimes they steal from others, but there's no just straight linear path, and thinking that way is going to make the next part a little bit confusing. So there's a capitalist feudal alliance, and they're blamed kind of for the World War I loss, the Bismarck and von Hindenburg alliance. After the 1929 crash, Germans supported socialists and communists. In 1923, German Nazism and German capitalism reach an accommodation, and this is very key. Hitler becomes Der Führer, and they purge the anti-capitalist elements of the party, Krieger and Otto Strasser specifically, but I'm not just talking about that. They purged them all, and not just if you were a part of the Nazi party, in society as well. The browncoats of the Nazis go on expeditions around town and round up people. And yes, they round up the Jews. They also round up a whole bunch of people they consider to be political adversaries. They also round up socialists. They also round up socialist thinkers. They also round up socialist politicians. They also round up any single person who may have had socialist writing or socialist ties or socialist planning or socialist building, things of that nature. 1932, not 19. Oh, sorry. Yes. Oop, fucking typo. Major typo. Now I have to go back to Photoshop and change this. Anyways, in 1932, German Nazism and German capitalism reach an accommodation. Hitler becomes the Führer, and they purge the anti-capitalist elements of the party, Gregor and Otto Strasser, as well as they round up, like I said, all of the socialist elements within society. We're talking thousands of people, by the way. The browncoats arrested communists. They arrested socialists. They despised them. There was an anti-Marxian sentiment that was deeply pervasive within Nazi society. Anyone telling you different is ignoring a huge part of history. That was key. This is one of the reasons why Nazism is associated directly with far-right ideology, because the hard center set of nationalism had to be combined with a hatred of liberalism, yes, as well as socialism and communism, all right? So when the brown shirts rounded them up, Hitler has now become the Führer. The capitalists merge with Nazism, and they oversee all major decisions of the companies while being allowed to accrue wealth. So this is kind of the part that becomes a little bit difficult, and I know a lot of people will say that sounds weird. You are still allowed to be working in industry. You're still allowed to be a factory owner. You're still allowed to be a capitalist. However, the Germans now oversee your factory and control your factory. Something that I thought would illustrate this very quickly, and I'm sure everyone has seen some of these movies.
What are you making?
Hinges, sir.
I've got some workers coming in tomorrow. Where the hell are they from again?
Yugoslavia, Commandant.
I've got to make room. Make me a hinge.
Yes, sir.
Now, this is, of course, a horrifying worker camp in Germany, illustrated in the film Schindler's List. The plot of Schindler's List is that Oskar Schindler, an industrious German, is able to maintain his factories and populate his factories with his workers who happen to be Jewish. And in an act of selfless courage, ends up using his position of power as a factory owner to help a whole bunch of Jewish members of his worker force escape alive under the Holocaust. This is one of the reasons it's not only a beautiful film, it's so well respected, and the story itself is one that's been told countless times to show that there is, in fact, noble figures who, even within high up positions of the Nazi Party or perhaps Germany itself or capitalists themselves, were willing to put their own lives on the line to save others. Quasi-history. So the capitalists merge with Nazism. They're able to oversee all major decisions that happen within the companies themselves. They're allowed to accrue wealth and maintain their factories. The Nazi government destroys socialist and independent labor unions, kills thousands of artists, intellectuals, activists. The fascist government aids in private enterprise and began rapid repairment and systemic planning to build a new German empire. Oh, sorry, rearmament. This is a neat graph. I'll pull it up on a larger one on an article that Jacobin had on the same topic to talk about. And this graph comes from Adam Tooze's The Wages of Destruction, the Making and Breaking of the Nazi Economy, to show you the rate of return on German industry between 1925 and 1941. Decided cha-ching. Yes, it was very good. Centralized planning is often a very powerful way to run an economy if it's done well, of course. And there were elements of Nazis overseeing the private industries of Nazi Germany that allowed a lot of them to thrive. Not just Nazis, by the way. Not just Nazis. We also have to think about American companies, because American companies wanted in on this too. They saw that the Germans were capable of creating vast amounts of wealth through the rapid militaristic rearmament and industries that were created therein. So companies like IBM, for example, were like, yeah, I don't care about the fact that America may be at war with you at this point. I am going to give out my computing services to be able to calculate and tabulate the huge amount of human sorting that you're going to do to put people into internment camps. That was IBM that did that. I forget if it was Coke or Pepsi, but one of them was like, we'll sell you to the Nazis. We'll just call ourselves Fanta. And they became Fanta after that. Hugo Boss, yes, Coco Chanel, Bayer, Ford, all of these companies did not care. There was no national sentiment that was worthy enough to them. They didn't, I guess, buy into American exceptionalism or the idea of old glory or anything like that. They were fine. The only thing they cared about was the monies. That's usually what most people care about when it's a corporation, right? That's why corporations probably shouldn't be recognized as people. Nazi capitalism, it only tells us that the economy improved under the Nazis, as it did in the United States under FDR. So there's a lot of different books on this. Thomas Piketty's Capital in the 21st Century compares the share of national income that went into capital in the US and Germany between 1929 and 1938. Suresh tells us that the share roughly tracks capital's rate of return. Long short story, capital was doing better under the Nazis than under FDR, not because of overall increases in economic performance in one country versus another, but because of the economic policies of the regime. Or so Suresh tells me. Usually academics aren't supposed to acknowledge that their debts to their friends or readers, but own all the errors as their own. But in this case, I'm blaming everything on Suresh. The second graph, which comes from this fascinating article by Thomas Ferguson and Hans-Joachim Voth, Betting on Hitler, the Value of Political Connections in Nazi Germany. Oh, actually, I should make some music in the background for the story. The second graph, which comes from this fascinating article by Thomas Ferguson and Hans-Joachim Voth, Betting on Hitler, the Value of Political Connections in Nazi Germany, tracks the stock market's performance in Britain, US, France, and Germany from January 1930 to November 1933. As you can see, in the early months that Hitler came to power, Germany's stock market performance was quite strong, outstripping all others. It's not until July that it even crosses paths with Britain's, the second best performer. On Twitter, Justin Paulson brought this fascinating article from the Journal of Economic Perspectives to my attention. It's called The Coining of Privatization and Germany's National Socialist Party. Apparently, the first use of the word privatization or reprivatization in English occurred in the 1930s in the context of explaining economic policy in the Third Reich. Did y'all know that? Can we record scratch? Can you record scratch by just playing this really slow? Hold on, let me try. Kind of. There you go. Yes. The first use of the word privatization or reprivatization in English occurred in the 1930s in the context of explaining the economic policy of the Third Reich. Yes. Yes. So when people tell you the Nazis were socialists, throw that back at them. Because you do now. Indeed, the English word was formulated as a translation of the German word Reprivatisierung. I'm probably saying that really wrong.
Reprivatisierung.
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 But the lesson here, and the one that's important, is, they were indeed capitalists. You can call it a hybrid model, the fascist hybrid model if you would like, but it was certainly a capitalist one that allowed private industry, private capital owners, factory owners to amass vast amounts of wealth, accrue vast amounts of wealth. It's one of the reasons that sometimes people characterize fascism as the final stage of capitalism, as in if it's left to its own devices, if it's combined with a sense of nationalism, of othering, if it's combined with economic disparity, if the people of a nation are really, really hurting, economy-wise, and all of a sudden this strong man comes along and he's promising you the solution, that he's going to go back to the olden days, that he's going to revert to a time when this country was better, he's going to make it great again, something of that nature, then he might be hearkening to a fascist time. After I sent him this article, Phil Murawski also sent me this piece by German Bell against the mainstream Nazi privatization of the 1930s from the Economic History Review. This article has also some fascinating findings. But yeah, make no mistake, please, when talking about the Fascism. It's a form of fascism is a form of far-right authoritarian ultranationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of the opposition, strong regimentation of society and the economy, which came to prominence in the early 20th century. Here's the important part, and the part that I think everyone should know. It's opposed to liberalism, democracy, Marxism, and anarchism. Fascism is placed on the far right within the traditional left-right spectrum. This is not, by the way, the communist view of this. This is not the communist reading of this. This is pretty universal within academia at this point. Because why wouldn't it be? Like, obviously, if you studied this.
Privatisiere meine Eier.
Privatisiere meinen Eier.
Privatisiere meine Eier.
Privatisiere meine Eier.
Privatisiere meine Eier.
Privatisiere meine Eier. That one's pretty good. Privatisiere meine Eier. There you go. Does that one do it? Yeah? Yeah? All right. Learning German with Lance. Hey, do you like movies? Do you like Serfs? Do you want movies and Serfs watching the movies? So then come over to the new channels. It's the Serfs the cinema. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks why do older generations believe the things they believe, one of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our gods, I'm Raft and Xander Corvus. We shall build golden idols in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker. Our soft, spongy flesh is yours to command. To our lords, Evan Nudie, Trevor R., Alexander Thaler, Ryan Lubin, Bisexual Black Gamer, Toefox, and Jeffrey Lamb, we proudly carry your sigils onto the battlefield. And to our Knights of the Round Table, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Timothy Hart, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophagic, Saren 42, Chronic to Hemphog, Callie Kotka, The Great Pudini, Von Janney, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Encosin, J. Fraser Cartwright, Jimmy Bignuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Nicholas Marks, Jopi, Josh Mickelson, Melissa Murphy, Todd Buckingham, Todd LaJeunesse, and Constance Joyce Lacheris. We tip our cap and lift our mug and salute you.